Howdy doody, guys. Welcome back to the first excuse me. Actually, I got a lot of music playing in my ear. Excuse me. Guys, first time for Town Hall here on live YouTube. Guys, this is a new format that we're trying to do because we're trying to bring you news, new features, all the awesomeness all in one place that's recorded so that we can actually give you guys content, package it in a way where when questions that happened in the past, when they happen in the future, we can give you guys that in a nice packaged way and not just have to regurgitate things like that, but it's a nice way to document. With that being said, I am super excited to be doing this new format, but also to be here with two amazing guests. You guys know Robert, but we also have the amazing Anthony. They're both from the Wix Studio team, but without any further ado, without stealing any thunder, and also for those who are watching, maybe who are not part of the community, Robert, Anthony, do you mind giving like a 1 or 2 minute introduction, who you are, what is it you do at Wix? That would be awesome.
Sure, I'll start things off since the community is probably a little more familiar with me. So my job is customer support and content creator, basically, I guess, at Wix for the communities. So we have a few different communities. I'm usually part of it, helping out people with any questions that they might have, technical issues they might be running into, collecting feedback, sending that up to the team. That's how they kind of dictate and decide, well, what do we want to do? And then also just creating content to let you guys know, hey, here's what Wix Studio can do. Here's what things it's capable of. Use that for your freelancing business, your design business, moderate other things, I guess, for your side hustles. And yeah, that's kind of my job and what I do. So very cool seeing everyone on this live platform. Pretty cool.
Yeah, so on my side, you can basically say I do what Robert does, but for developers. Basically, we're as a developer advocate, and there's a team of us. We are here to support developers and everything that they need. That's everything from making sure the community is running well to making sure bugs and feedback and all those issues get addressed and up the chain within Wix, and also producing educational content and material, kind of like this little session. But yeah.
Beautifully said. Thank you guys for your intro. And now that I actually fixed my technical difficulty, I told both Robert and Anthony before, I was like, pause the live stream. And the thing that I did not do before we went live is pause my live stream, and all the audio is rushing into my brain. So thank you guys for dealing with that. All right, so back on track for what we have planned for you guys today. I know our main community is heavily creative designers, but since we have Anthony here, and also because we're giving some of this time specific to dev questions, a little bit more on the technical side of things when it comes to coding, because we have both Anthony and Robert here, we're going to be discussing the power of Velo, the value to or of Velo for non-technicals or non-technical people as well as technical coders, how to leverage Velo as a non-technical person. Maybe we can discuss how AI plays into there, and also to answer, as we always do every town hall, general questions that you guys have and technical questions that you guys have opted or really submitted in our community. That's one thing I want to mention to you guys. Because of this new format, in our Discord channel, we have a town hall questions channel that we are trying to get you guys to submit questions to, so we can prioritize those larger, technical, heavier questions. We can read through them, we can understand them before we go live, and kind of understand how we need to roll out our town hall stuff. So we already have that stuff covered and outlined, but we have some awesome announcements today too. And Roberto, Anthony, if you guys want to add more to them in terms of what's going on in the Wix Studio fam, feel free to share them. But first off, let me go ahead and share my screen. We have the new FWD blog by Wix Studio. Now, Anthony or Robert, do you guys are part of this, know a little bit more intimately the new things that are being shared on this platform? Do you guys have anything to add? Robert, let's start with you, and then Anthony, I know you have some things to add to this.
Sure. So I guess you could say FWD. I just said forward because that's immediately what I pictured it is, and that is what it stands for. But
thank you. Okay. FWD. Brandon can spell. Great.
Maybe they should have thrown in an R, but yeah, no. For forward, basically, it's just kind of a new update to the shaping design. If you had seen or have been sent out to Editor X, you probably got those emails, those newsletters, those blog posts. So forward is just kind of that, but for Wix Studio. But one thing that's very interesting about it is, and you can see from some of the articles, Brandon's like scrolling up and down, a lot of it is focused also on agencies, design. I mean, one of the posts on there is like how to charge more from your client and not lose the clients. If you scroll down, I think a little bit, it's that one with like the $800 on there. So again, it's focusing a little bit more on the business side, in addition to like, hey, here's how you can use AI with your businesses and things like that. So I think it's very cool that it's not just very design centric. It is very much, well, cool. How can I use this in a business application as well?
Got you. And Anthony, I know you were saying, because we're strictly discussing some dev stuff today, what do you got to share with the community and those who are watching and going to be watching the replay? Some of your favorite things about the Forward blog, or that will be a part of the Forward blog.
Yeah, so on the Forward blog, we're working on producing some content for it too, a little bit more technical. So there's going to be a good mix of content. You know, I feel like Wix Studio is very much this professional developer tool, and so our content is going to reflect that. And yeah, I'm excited for what's coming. But yeah, I can tell you that a few weeks ago, I was basically told to start, writing. So that's all I got.
Pen to paper, my friend, pen to paper. Sounds good. Thank you guys. And also, I wanted to say hello to you guys. I skimmed on you guys in the chat. I wanted to say hello to Simon, Dustin, Anthony. Hello again in the chat. We have Amanda, Jesse, hi, and Nina as well. I didn't want to skimp out. If you guys are also watching, you're new here, say hello, tell us where you're coming in from. Next up, before we get to some of our community Q&A, let's talk about what you've been putting together with Jesse, Robert. Tell us about Wix Vault.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know if you'll probably pop it up now. Sorry, I feel like a director, like now. But we had actually already had this up a little bit beforehand. We just didn't have a domain. I think we asked in some of the communities, hey, what do you think would be a good name for this library of content? We've already been creating video content for the communities, but a big thing is it's just kind of lost in timelines and in channels. So we wanted to just kind of have a library basically of, hey, here's where you can go and see the past content that we've done. I think we were still trying to upload some of it. Some things were they were uploaded to like Screencast or Clipchamp, and I think we've had a little bit of difficulties trying to get that content back. But for the most part, most of our, like almost all of our content is available on there. So searchable, clickable, and we're going to be adding more content on there too. So reading content, blog content. I was actually going to be sending out a question today, like, what's your number one tip to probably recommend for people? Get those answers and consolidate it so anyone who's new can see, oh, hey, cool, they have a blog post. My number one tip would be this. Cool. So Jesse handled a lot of design work. I handled a lot of the CMS, like backend stuff. So,
No.
And actually, I think we might show it a little bit later if Anthony's going to show something related to code. I'm not a big coder, but I was able to manage to do a few cool things on there just using it. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I'd love to see it.
All right, so that is it for announcement, guys, and I appreciate your patience because now we get into the nitty gritty. So Anthony, let's start the interview. We got to talk a little bit. Thank you for waiting for us to get through the announcements. I think that's really important for our community to know and just understand those things are there. So Anthony, let's discuss a little bit about Velo. What does that bring to the table for a Wix user? Let's just start basic. What does Velo do? How does it empower the Wix user?
Yeah, so Velo is our word for basically being able to write JavaScript on your website. And what that means at a really high level is you can essentially do much more custom business logic. So there's a lot of, various business requirements that obviously Wix Studio has provides so much just in the editor itself. But sometimes when you're working with a client, you'll encounter one of their business needs that can't be provided for just directly in the editor. And so when that happens, Velo is a great option because you can go and basically write any business logic you want. So for example, if you, I don't know if this is a perfect example because somebody might point out and say, Wix can do this, but this is what's on the top of my head. If you have a new user that gets subscribed, but you want to send out notifications on maybe 2 or 3 different like notification APIs or something because your client has some crazy business need, that's something you can do with Velo and JavaScript. So that if somebody wants to get like sent an SMS or something, and you have a third-party provider that does that, you can go ahead and hook these types of things up. Really, there's no limit there, so it's hard to condense it down into one thing, but it's basically just dealing with improving the business logic of your website if you need it, or extending it.
Got you. And so that kind of leads us into one of the first questions, general questions. Throughout the primary Wix platform, through the transition to EditorX, through EditorX's transition to Wix Studio, how has the dev relationships, or DevRel, I guess as you call it, team, improved the Velo experience for the Wix users?
Yeah, so the Velo experience has been improving in quite a few ways. We've been working on getting our documentation improved in various areas. There's not necessarily our team doing it, but there is a team at Wix basically working on improving how the APIs work within Velo. So previously, a lot of APIs, you had to either use them in the front end or the back end. Now they're a lot more flexible to that. And there's a whole bunch of just general improvements too. And, it's one thing to also say like Velo's improving in this way and that way. We also feel that like Velo has helped improve the product itself, because, for example, prior to Wix Studio, if you were doing some really complex animations, you'd probably go ahead and do it in Velo. But then that kind of helps inform, developers who are actually building the Wix Studio product and other products to say, hey, we keep building these animations in Velo. Could we maybe just do them directly in the editor? Because it seems like something we can do. And now you see that the Wix Studio editor is a lot more powerful. So there's kind of also that give and take where it's not just that Velo improves in isolation or the editor improves in isolation, but they kind of play together with each other.
So it's a little bit of cat and mouse as the Velo, basically as the coding experience improves, you guys are pulling that into the editor, making it so that just like creatives like us can be like, oh, we can click buttons now. This deep,
well, also making
essentially
it so developers can do it, right? Like if I could just click buttons to do something, I'm going to click buttons. I'm going to write code when I need to write code.
Yeah. So how does, and this is just, this is an ignorant question, but I'm really excited to ask the question. How do you guys, because it's easy for me to understand how you guys make the creatives' lives easier by making it easier to just hit buttons and things happen. But how do you improve the developer's experience? I know this is not really I don't think our main community question, or that would come from the community, but just how do you guys improve, like people who use Velo, how do you improve how they use Velo? And I'm sure, did you already answer that question? Because I'm just like,
but I mean, there's a lot, like it's a big thing to improve, right? So we improve the developer's experience in a lot of ways too. I think that's a really good way to think about it too, because a lot of what I was talking about was basically developer like interface stuff. You could kind of call it, I guess. But for improving a developer's experience, we've been doing things like moving everybody over to the new forum that was at least initially started as a DevRel initiative and then expanded larger throughout the company. We're having a renewed focus on our educational material. You might remember from about a year ago, we were pumping out quite a lot of videos explaining how to do certain things with Velo. And so that's another way we've improved. The blog, like we mentioned, we've been speaking at conferences on the Velo ecosystem just to get more people exposed to it and expose people to new ideas. And all of these things work into improving the developer's experience. So there's a lot that we do. And then on the more practical, like, oh, I'm working with a tool and this wasn't working the way I expected, or this is missing. Those types of things, we take all that feedback, we condense it, we filter through it, and then we try to get the key things, reincorporated into Velo and reincorporated into the product.
Got you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And for those of you guys who are in the chat, I know some of you guys did drop some of your questions in our Discord community. Trust me, I got them. But I want to take advantage of the time that we have Anthony here and also Robert. But I want to get as much as I can from Anthony, and then maybe the last 30 minutes, 30 minutes to jump into your guys' questions. I think 30. But so thank you for your patience. Don't go away. All right. So just not out of curiosity, but if you were to, just because it's our audience, someone like myself, this is why I'm asking the question. Starting with Velo, where do you start? Let's jump there. I know you were talking to me a lot about different resources yesterday. Where is the source of truth? Where do I go, please?
Start? Like, what, if you don't program at all, like where do you start? Or if you are a coder, where do you start?
Well, I guess let's simplify the question. Do I need to know how to program to jump into, or do I need to have some foundation before I jump into Velo?
I wouldn't say you necessarily need a foundation. It's kind of like, oh, if I were to go try to speak another language, where do I start? I just start by like getting a few translations and imitating it, and then I go from there. And I can get away with just that sometimes. And so like that's kind of a similar way to think about programming, is you don't need to have, beat in fundamentals of programming into your head. Like there are a lot of things where you can encounter an issue, you can go ahead and try Googling it. You can find some code on Stack Overflow that I see people joking about in the forum, and then go and copy and paste it and see what happens. But it's true. Like this is how everybody programs. This is even how, even when you're a seasoned programmer, a lot of your time is spent just Googling stuff to figure out how other people have done stuff, or maybe you forgot how to do something. I would say where you would start is, start with something simple. Start on a website that isn't live. Don't start on your client's live websites, but start on a test site, or maybe you have had some business need in the past and you said no to it. Maybe start investigating how you might have been able to solve that with JavaScript. But yeah, everybody's process is going to be different in getting started. But I think a kind of related question to that, not to get too long-winded, is where do you go for help? And
there we go.
Yeah, where do you go for help? Well, we all need help sometimes. So you would go to maybe the Wix Studio forum is a great place. You could go to the Devs on Wix Discord. I'm sure we'll be able to provide links to that. And you can go to the Velo API docs that have a lot of good reference material. So I am sharing my screen here. I don't know if we could switch to it just really quick, just so I can kind of show what that looks like. But all right, we're up.
And also apologize. I tried to grab the best quality I could from the screen grab. We're doing the best we can, but it's there.
We'll share the links.
If it looks blurry, I'll describe what the blurry things on the screen are. So you'll see the Velo API docs, and on the left we have like all these what we call APIs. These are different ways, different things that Velo exposes to you that you can then go ahead and use in your products. So one you might use, though I would actually say a lot of animations you could do in the editor or CSS, but something that might be familiar is the animations library that we provide here. And you'll see at the start, it kind of tells you how the process goes. It has some like functions, but what's most important, especially if like you haven't programmed at all, is you can look on the right here and you'll see a bunch of examples. So for example, here you can see, create a timeline with options, and then create a simple animation. And you can kind of, start to make sense of this. Like maybe I could go ahead and copy and paste that code, put it into my website. Oh, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? A lot of things are just going to be taking code that already exists and then adapting these little hashtags so that they match the item ID, the element IDs within your website. And so like, for example, just really quick, and I promise I'm not trying to teach you how to code, but when I hover on this table here, you see up there in the top left, I actually can move my mouse to it or it would disappear. It says hashtag table1. That's something I could refer to if I was trying to animate the table on that page, for example. I would change this hashtag pink to hashtag table 1. And the code's not really that scary, right? You can kind of read this and see and kind of get a sense for what it does. Oh, it has a certain duration. It's moving something on the x-axis. It's scaling it. It's making 1.3 times its size. And it's doing an ease out and back, which is akin to pretty typical, like, what do you call it? A very typical easing that you would do in CSS or something. So if you're familiar with animations at all, you've probably seen easing in our editor, and it kind of makes sense here too, right? So it's basically just go try things out. Don't be afraid of the code. You're not going to really hurt yourself. Just, you know, try it on a test website. That was a little long-winded.
All right.
But, yeah.
I'll chime in just a little bit because, like, I coded a little bit in high school, like C++, and that's a completely different language. But just knowing if then is more or less how all computing works. Like, if you do this, then this happens. That's kind of, I think, really for a lot of this stuff. It's like, oh, if I click this button, then this animation happens. If the page loads, then this happens. If this happens, and or else, then this happens. And that's maybe like I don't know if that's accurate or not. Like, Anthony, if you feel like that's kind of true or not, but at least for me, I feel like that's how a lot of this stuff works.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Knowing just if and else, a few little things can really impact what you can do with any sort of coding. And I can tell you myself that I never went to school for programming. I'm also a self-taught programmer, so it's entirely possible for everybody to do.
Awesome.
And the documentation is great. Yeah, I literally just copy a lot of it. I'm just like, and there's examples too, so those are good places to start as well.
Awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for us to kind of dive into, because I was like, I know Wix Studio has basically its academy where it's very easy for a creator to be like, oh, there's kind of projects I can kind of follow along with. And basically what I was trying to get us to, and I think we ended up getting to, where it's just like, hey, well, actually, let me clear, because I don't think we use those words, right? There's Wix Studio Academy, sort of, let's build this one step at a time together. Is there like a Velo Academy? Is what you just showed basically, I know it's a resource, but is there a Velo Academy sort of thing in existence, resource in existence?
Yes, actually, there's our Devs on Wix YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/devsonwix. I'll actually put it in our private chat and you could share it. But that's where you would go to learn a bunch of things on what to do with Velo. You know, me and several other developer advocates are all there kind of showing off how you can get started. And there's just a wealth of resource there. We obviously need to get to producing more of these videos, but there is a ton of material that's still very relevant today. So if that's how you like to learn, then I would say go check that out.
Awesomeness. All right, I think that pretty much covers like the general. I think we hit all good things, guys. Like, what is Velo? How do we use it? How do we learn it from like base format? Like, where do I go to at least get my 1-2 step before I start having how do I develop a language little by little? And I think those resources will help our community and those who end up watching the replay. All right, let's jump into some of the community questions that we had. I'm going to share my screen here and just so we can all see. So How Play, Simon, and I believe a couple of you other peeps in the chat here asked some of these questions. So the first question is, and then How Play, we see your live questions. We'll get to those, but I'm trying to stay organized. All right. So we've got, first up, using CSS to adjust elements. Actually, I'm going to reformat the question. What is easier for load timing, or load speed, essentially? Using CSS or actually using the editor to move and or adjust elements?
Yeah, I would say that it probably doesn't matter too much. I'd say in general, like, what you should probably think about more is what's optimal in terms of the effort you're doing and your project complexity. So if you can do it in the editor, you probably just should. And then if you can't, then do it in CSS. And if you can't do it in CSS, then do it in JavaScript. So focus on basically what the tools are best at. The editor is going to be best for your layout and structure while doing some style and business logic. But whenever you hit those style and business logic limits, then go to CSS or JavaScript respectively. I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about that. If you want to time it out, you can, but yeah, I don't think it's that necessary. I think what is provided in the editor works very well.
Got it. All right, how play. I know that was one of your big questions of the day. You were like, load speed, highly important. Which one? Thank you. The next question is, does the CSS support animation CSS now? First of all, does the way that was asked, does that come through congruently to you? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay,
and,
awesome. It had made
CSS,
no sense to me, so I'm glad.
It's all good.
I was like, there's two CSSs in there.
It made perfect sense. CSS animations are supported. Basically, all CSS is supported except for tag level CSS. Like you can't do tag on just like the body. You can't do CSS on just the body tag, but all other CSS is supported. So actually, I made a little animation here. If we want to,
yep, let's do it.
Pop it up really quick, just to show that it works exactly the same. So if I come over to my CSS here that I wrote for my site, I went and on this button, I gave it a class. Where is that? Over here. I gave it a custom class called button. So that gives me that dot button class, right? That's the same code you can see over here. And then I just did a regular CSS animation. I defined the transition on the button itself. And I said when I hover over the button, this actually won't work, it doesn't matter. I'll transform it and rotate that button 90 degrees. Not very useful, but just a quick demonstration. So if we hop over to the preview, give it a second to load. And then I hover over, we get that little animation where it rotates 90 degrees. And so yeah, animations absolutely work. You can build all sorts of very complex CSS code pen fun animations in there.
Awesomeness. All right, next question. So this one was actually a really good question. I never really thought about it. Does the CSS coding available for, I just need to reformat this. When you put CSS coding on an asset that you save to your library, when you take that asset and pull it into another project, does the CSS stay?
I don't believe so. And the additional part of that question was kind of like, can they use Wix blocks to do so? I would say for when you're creating assets that you want to keep all the styling and reuse it, I would definitely veer towards using Wix blocks. I'm not a Wix blocks expert, but I don't believe at the moment that CSS is portable at all between sites and between elements. They're all specific to that site.
Awesome. All right, let's see. So there was another, and I'm sure you have like all these memorized. Guys, listen, when Anthony was preparing for this, he sent me a doc that was like 3 pages yesterday. It's actually not even yesterday, 3 days ago. And I was like, the man is more prepared for the live stream than I am. So first of all, I have to thank you like publicly for doing that, because it just made today go really smoothly and be able to figure out how we want to have today's conversation. But the next question is since Wix only supports uploading of fonts, is it possible to directly call Google Fonts?
I tried that actually this morning, and I wasn't able to. So for me, no. Maybe for somebody who knows something I don't, perhaps. But I would say that, since Wix supports uploading of fonts, you can just really use that facility. I know fonts on Google Fonts tend to have pretty permissive licenses. So not a technical question, but a licensing question. You'll want to check that. But if you can download and use that font within your project, just go ahead and upload it. Wix fonts are also on Wix's own CDN. That content gets delivered everywhere. It's probably cached in most browsers as a result of people browsing Wix sites. So yeah, I would say that it shouldn't make much of a difference between using Wix's own font facilities or using Google's.
Alrighty. All right, and I know you tagged this one in our document as it is not a coding question, but since we're all here, will Wix Studio make some tutorials about connecting the Google Tag Manager, or really just how to deal with Google Ads in the platform? And either Anthony, Robert, you can also, both of you guys can tag team this one.
Yeah, I could take it if.
Rock, paper, scissors, guys. Just,
Yeah, I can chime in. I think maybe with
whoever
what I
wants to
know,
jump.
Yeah.
you might have a little more insight.
Yeah, in that case, Wix supports Google Tag Manager. You can take your GTM tag ID, whatever it's called, and throw it into Wix, and it'll work like any other one. You'll start populating your Google Analytics dashboards when you do that. And then on the Google Ads side too, you can create Google Ads from within the Wix dashboard. I think part of that question too was about collecting data to analyze the ads. All of that part though would be handled on Google's side, not on Wix's side, since Google does all the analytics management and then also does the ads for you. I think that's all something that you would tie in on the Google side, but again, that's not a coding question, so my knowledge on this section is a bit limited. We do have links though to those things that we can share, so you can go check them out.
Yeah, I was gonna say the support articles on the Google Tag Manager are pretty good, and I was trying to see if I can find webinars, because I think that would qualify more as like an SEO question possibly, and the SEO has its own library, so they do their own webinars, and hey, maybe that's someone we can get on here at some point, Brandon. If the community thinks that'd be cool.
Yeah. All right, let me see. I'm gonna jump into our Discord really quick because I feel like there was one other question it was Simon's that we had missed. So Simon was asking, we have the option to choose size, and in this, you guys might have to battle between, I don't know who this goes to, but we have 3 minds here. Mine's a little smaller, but let's try to do our best. All right, so Simon is asking, we got the option to choose sizing preference for the whole site, allowing us to use advanced sizing that those of us are familiar with if we've used Editor X to save time having to change the size of all elements. How likely is it that we may get something similar to advanced CSS Grid where we can select, dang man.
I think I know the question.
Listen,
Boy,
just for me, please. But I have to say this, guys, reading is hard for Brandon. If you can format these or at least ask ChatGPT to simplify them, that'd be awesome. But I think we catch your drift. Advanced CSS grids, is that coming? Is there a thing?
I hope so. I forwarded the feedback before. The feedback has been given. So for anyone who's watching this, maybe VOD or on the channel not familiar, not that long after the Wix Studio launch, there was the option to, instead of having to go to each manual element and choose the advanced sizing, now it's just a toggle, so you can just toggle it on for everything. So I take it the feedback is, hey, I want to be able to go and similarly like that, make everything instead of the super grid, use the advanced CSS grids. So I forwarded the feedback. They heard it back pretty quickly on the advanced sizing. I would hope maybe that they hear it about this. I mean, I guess I kind of get it, but in some instances, I like using the super grid as well. Just like, I don't necessarily have to go into the advanced sizing for all elements. So I think it just kind of maybe depends on the project. If you feel you're using the advanced CSS grid a little bit more, especially Simon, if you want, let me know or share the feedback where you're like, hey, I don't like using this, because that might be a deeper thing of, okay, well, design wise, maybe it doesn't make sense to do it this way and it makes more sense to have. But again, for me, I don't usually have to go into it unless I have a very specific design in mind. So let me know and we can go into it and see, hey, maybe the heuristics don't work very well, or there's something, a deeper conversation there to be had.
Awesome. Anthony, any thoughts on anything to add there?
No. Roberto was better than I did.
No. Thumb up, done.
I think on the studio platform, yeah. I mean, to be fair though, Anthony, when you were talking most of the stuff, I'm like, I have no idea what happened. That's up.
Guys,
I'm like, thankfully the documentation is very good, so I can manage to get through a lot of it.
Yeah. Speaking of, well, I feel this way talking to both you, Robert, and Anthony. But when I was meeting Anthony for the first time, you know, when you kind of meet somebody, you're like, damn, I'm dumb. Like that kind of slapped me a little bit. But Anthony, if you ever get a chance to talk to him or hop in Devs on Wix, definitely use him as a resource, chat him up, but also everything that he said here. Like, don't go back and ask him the same questions that he's shined some light on here. Take the resources, go to the links that we put in the chat, use them to your advantage. And then also specifically in the notes that he gave here in the document that we're going through for this live conversation, he has I highlighted it in red, but it was like how to ask proper questions to get the answers that you want. So Anthony, how can people ask questions in the best way to get to the best result? I know, like, I had a little chuckle to myself when I read that. I was like, but it's important for people to know, because people just ask questions sometimes without.
In general, so yeah, if you have questions, you definitely, and you'll see this too if you've ever like tried asking a question on something like Stack Overflow, but you want to ask your question clearly and concisely, because you almost want to put in as much work into getting your question answered as possible before somebody else is answering it, because other people have a lot of questions to answer. And also in a lot of cases, like, we have a wonderful community, and you're going to get a lot of answers from people who, you know, they're not Wix employees. They are just basically helping because they like to help, because that's like part of the culture that we have in software. And so you want to make sure your question is very clear and concise, both so you get the most accurate answer you can get, and so you respect other people's time when they're offering their free time to help you out. Also, in service of doing that, you want to reduce your problem to basically the smallest code sample that reproduces the bug. You don't want to go into your web page where it has like 500 lines of code, copy and paste it all and share it, and then expect somebody to read through it. It would be almost like saying, you know, like, the structure of this chapter of my book has an issue, or there's a typo on page 64. Here's the entire chapter. Why would you do that? So please don't do that. Also, share a test site and share steps to reproduce that bug too, if it is indeed a bug. This way we can figure out whether it's a bug in your code or something else. And also, you'll find that when you do these steps, you'll start to answer questions for yourself. Sometimes developers do this thing called like rubber duck programming, where they'll have like a little rubber ducky, like, or some sort of physical object they'll leave on their table, and they'll explain what their code is supposed to do and their problem to that inanimate object. And 80% of the time they answer their own question. So that's another good reason to go through this process, is because you can actually end up answering your own question and learning from and teaching yourself in the process. I do it all the time, maybe not to a rubber ducky, but I like talk about problems that I have out loud, both coding problems and life problems. This is life advice. No, I'm joking.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, this is
coding
actually
advice is life advice.
You can take this and apply it to any aspect of life, and it will work exactly the same. And lastly, if there is like a bug that you think is related to Wix, I can actually show this on the screen, but you'll want to include what's called a request ID. So let me actually just open up a website really quick, and hopefully should be able to show this. One sec. So we have this notion of what's called a Wix request ID, and let me see if I can find one. Oh, this website's not doing enough to produce one. Anyway, don't worry about it, but there's a kind of header in requests that is called Wix request ID, and it's a special number that if you gave it to us, it really helps us in tracking down the problems. But if it's your first time, we'll help you out and point out where to go to get that. I just don't have a good example that I can show at the moment.
Got you. All right, so there's a couple questions in the chat that we have gone through all of the questions that you guys have asked in the Discord, and thank you for those of you who actually took the time to preload your questions so we had some time to think about it. Anthony had some time to actually put some things together prior to going live with us, so we weren't like, all right, what's the question? Let's open up Wix Studio. Let's put some things together and that take 15 minutes. Because we do have some awesome questions, but we don't have that much. We've got like 20 minutes left. Question, Robert, Howplay had, if you scroll up in the chat, I'm not sure if you have chat open, but if I have a couple questions that I want to bring up, but if you can figure out what Howplay is mentioning, I feel like this is another situation where I don't understand the question. If you could try to decipher what's going on there, and Anthony too, but actually, no, Robert, you do that. Me and Anthony are gonna answer the next questions coming up. Okay. So we got Dustin Z in the chat. First off, thank you very much for coming, my friend. The question is, or what he's saying is, I'm creating a sports stat score page for a client. I've built a counter widget block, but need to know if there is a way to total items at the bottom. Whoops, I covered up the question. At the bottom, and then save to a data set. So to me, this sounds pretty complex, but let's try to simplify it a little bit. Anthony, is there a way to take at least half of that question, maybe even verbally kind of discuss, or maybe show something simple of how we might attack a stat scoring page, or even just a widget? How complicated is that question? It sounds complicated to me.
It's not too bad. I assume this is like how to do it using some JavaScript. So basically the answer is yes. If you're doing this in JavaScript, it's fairly straightforward to do. You could actually use, let me find it really quick. You could probably use a helper library to do this, or actually there probably is, what's it called? So actually, if you look at my screen right now, what you'll see is, oh, that's it. That's the function that I wanted. I'll just start from the beginning, actually. So what I did here is what I swear I told you that that programmers do is in JavaScript. Oh, I want to sum an array, so I would go ahead and just search that, and it is this function called reduce. I forgot exactly what JavaScript calls it, but this is what you would basically use to, sum an array. So for example, here you've got these little code snippets where this is an array of 1, 2, and 3, and if you want to sum them, you can sum them easily, and you'll get the result of 6. So yeah, that's how you would do that in JavaScript. And then so like if you went to Wix Data and did your data query, or actually, and you got your your data query results, you would get this thing called items. So you would have items, and they would be items dot whatever. So what it would kind of look like is, I'm not going to run this code, but we're just going to pretend like I am. Where's my page? Oh, pages. There we go. So if we did something like I had my let items equal, and this is like kind of what it will look like too, within, this is what it will look like when you got data back. You would basically have an array of items, and you would have some sort of like value, it would be like 5, and then you would have another one, and it would be value like 7, and then you want to go through this array of items and sum them all. So you would do something like items dot reduce, and then you would take your item, and you would go ahead. Can I type? You would go ahead and do something like item dot value plus, how's reduce work exactly? The partial sum. Okay. You would go ahead and take something like this. I just actually you would take your item. So you would take your items and you'd reduce them. And so you would get your, you would take your accumulator. This is should really be called an accumulator. You would take your accumulator and you would add to it your item dot autocomplete is not my friend right now. And that's kind of what you would do here. So you have that. And autocomplete is really messing with me. So that's basically how you would get that sum, is you would just do this little reduce function over this array. And so like you can take a complex array too. It doesn't need to be an array just of values like you saw here. It can be an array of objects, and you're going in, and for each of those objects, you're popping it out. So this will first be this one, and it'll take i.value, which is this here, and it'll sum it. It'll add it to the accumulator that we're starting at the value 0, and then it'll go to the next one. So then on the next loop of the items, it'll be this one, and then it'll take i.value 7, and then sum that, and add it to the accumulator, and what you're going to get out is the number 12. So hopefully that answers the question.
I don't doubt that definitely answers the question. Did we follow? I struggled, but that's why we had the replay button, guys. Listen, the main things that Anthony said here was, first, we start off with everybody can do Google. Then also rewatch his solution, and it gets you seeing how not only he thinks, but how he's doing his step-by-step approach. And even if you didn't get it through the first run, that's fine. That's what learning's about. You're not gonna see it one time and just be a genius. Watch somebody do their steps, their methodology, rewatch it, and see if you can kind of start to take each step slowly. Rewind, play, step 1, pause, go do it. Play, step 2, go do it. So Dustin, even though you're like the solution, crazy, listen, take the time. He took 5 minutes to put that sucker together. Rewatch it. And also, if you're still having some trouble, we have our Discord, my friend. We have tomorrow, 1 p.m. EST, to take you a little bit further into what you're able to do today. So let's get started a little bit from what Anthony was able to show us today, and then come tomorrow in our Discord, and we can take your hand and go a little bit further. And yes, playing slow-mo. All right, let's see. So we got Dustin, Jake. Jake, I know you had a CMS question. I know it's not coding, but we're coming up. We have about 12 minutes here. And I want to do one of two things. I want to make sure we get everybody's questions. I know Howplay still had his question. We got Dustin. Nina has a question. Jake, you didn't format your question just yet. I know you just have one. And then let's see. Robert, were we able to figure out what Howplay was trying to ask?
I think the most recent question is probably the
you got like 5 questions in there.
More formatted way. So, but I think I'm also just going to try to reformat it. But which way is better for using the Wix IDE? For example, I want to add text box _ input parentheses. But then he turns off the IDE, goes into input for Studio, and then goes back to the IDE. So I take it this is probably in reference to the way that you mentioned about the element ID. If you wanted to put the element ID, you kind of have to go into the editor and then change it out for the IDE. I don't know, that's like feedback, Anthony, or something you've seen. Because I haven't had to use the IDE myself too often. I'm usually okay with the page code panel.
Yeah, I missed the first part of that question. I didn't quite understand.
I guess if you want to open up the Studio editor, maybe I can kind of like highlight it a little bit and just figure it out with troubleshoot. But I think the way Howplay is doing some of his things is he goes to the IDE, so like the dedicated area.
Oh, okay.
And I guess he's on the page code, checking out like button, whatever, like button or table, whichever element that you have. And I guess then what he is like saying, if he needs to change the element ID, he needs to go like close this out and then go into the editor to change it out, and then come back to the IDE to continue working.
Yeah, that's how it works right now. I know the IDE is being very actively developed, so maybe in the future that will change. That's also, though, potentially a very hard thing to change, just because like you have to have some sort of reference, like you have to be able to like click on it or something.
Yeah.
What to select. On the plus side, though, is if you're editing this is only really going to crop up when you're editing front end code. So you do have the ability to, modify your code within the front end itself, so that you don't have to tab back and forth to the IDE. The IDE is very nice, but if you're doing something like that, you can also just do it here. So if I rename the table like to my table, and then I would just do the same here, and that would be like the same reference without having to go and tab back and forth. But yeah, I understand the difficulty there. I just don't know what the solution would be otherwise.
Yeah, but I take it then in your case, and I'm gonna see if that kind of answers the question. And if not, I might offline check it out. But I guess in your case, then you probably prefer using this for front end code, and then the IDE more for back end code, where you're probably I don't need to interact with the elements.
Yeah, I would say so. It really depends on what your preference is. I like using the IDE itself. It has a lot of nice features and niceties. But if I was doing something where, I need to rename an element and then edit it, I probably would just do it right here. So yeah, you can use both. I'd probably use both, depending on what's more effective.
Cool. Yeah, again, I haven't gone into the IDE very much, but I just like it. There's a dark mode at least. That's cool.
Yeah, there is.
That's a plus.
Well, you can actually change the colors too in the preferences, but
yeah,
I want to get to the answers.
You could change them to whatever you want.
All right. That aside, I like colors. But we got about 8 minutes left. We got to tie some things up. We're gonna close out with Nina's question, and I think this is a pretty good one, or at least I believe it is. It's a question that I wish I was able to conceptualize. So Nina was asking, how would you use JavaScript versus Velo in Wix if you wanted to copy something, like if you wanted to copy something from Stack Overflow, for example?
Yeah, well, what I copied from Stack Overflow before is just straight up JavaScript that I then modified a bit for my problem that I was solving. But yeah, there's nothing you're going to find on Stack Overflow that's about regular JavaScript that won't work on Velo. Where it might not work is if you like find something that's about like querying data from a SQL table. Obviously, that won't work on Velo because we don't do direct SQL querying and we don't have some of the popular libraries there. We have our own that's called, the Wix data library instead. But I would say 90% of the time, whatever you find on Stack Overflow is going to be the same JavaScript that's going to work in your IDE on Velo.
Awesome. All right, with that said, with our last minutes left with 7, is there anything, Anthony, Robert, that you think we should have touched on or didn't have the time to discuss earlier in our conversation? Anthony, you can jump in first if you have anything.
I would say one thing is the AI assistant can be very cool because it can give you really interesting answers and help you a bit with coding, but it is something also to, when you work with it, you want to make sure to ask it very specific questions, not too general, and you'll probably want to go back and forth with it and clarify with it because sometimes we get people asking questions where it's something that essentially the AI assistant spit out and it's not quite there yet or robust enough to answer all your questions without some hand holding and some back and forth. It's going to improve though. So yeah, I just think that's something to keep in mind is that like the AI is not suddenly a very talented programmer that will do everything for you for free. It's somewhere in between where if you know a bit of coding though, that can really help you with using the AI because when you're working with it, you can kind of start to see where it got something wrong and then make the correction yourself and that type of thing. So yeah, definitely. It's just not the perfect solution in all cases. So that's something to keep in mind.
Got you. And thanks for that. That was one thing in the back of my mind. I was like, man, I feel like if we even touch on that, that's going to open a whole, we're going to drop into a rabbit hole. And I think hopefully in the future, or maybe just like a 20-30 minute segment of just kind of going, because I've tried it. I really didn't even understand it, how to use it from a UI perspective. Like you were saying, it's still working in progress and it's going to continue to get better. But just kind of having like a little showcase or a little bit. Are there workshops for the AI, out of curiosity?
I don't think so. Would Robert know? But I don't believe so.
I covered it a little bit on when I went in. Well, did I? Yeah, in one of the town halls, I did go into it a little bit. I was going to say if I made content about it. But I'm like, I don't think so, because I'm like, I think I did cover it a little bit, but I'm like, I don't really know how to code so well, so I'm not gonna be able to go into super in depth with the way it kind of works for you guys. But I did highlight it, I think, a little bit in one of the previous town halls, which again, I'm glad that going forward we're recording these, because then I could be like, isn't one of them? I'm trying to remember which one, but if you go through them, maybe we'll see that we covered it.
Yeah, and that's another reason we've done so many things in the past that we've just lost, and I think
I can't even remember.
Very beneficial to just have these recorded. Or Anthony, I'm not sure, maybe we can talk offline if that's something you'd be interested in, kind of showcasing how you're using it, how other people are using it in a proper way, so our community and those using the AI out on the internet can use it in an efficient manner. But conversation for another time. Robert, what have we missed? We've got 4 minutes left.
Cool. Yeah, so I was just going to say, I don't know, I guess if you wanted to go to the wixvault.com website, our website.
Yes, sir.
And just to highlight that. It's funny because I was just going to give the tips, and I'm like, well, I have a live example to kind of go into it, so I don't think it's going to rank for you. Let's see. There we go. But if you go to the video library at the very top, there's a search bar. If you scroll, you have to scroll down, I think, a little bit, or you can go to the video library from there. And that search, like if you start typing in, like, let's say editor add-on, you can see it's like querying like the information, and it's getting everything, and it's just kind of like getting as you're typing in. I actually got that from the Devs on Wix like YouTube channel. And there was an older one, I think it was for like Wix, like for the Wix editor. And they're like, hey, yeah, here's how you do this. Oh, look, when we're typing this in, then it's not delayed enough. Like it's doing it too fast, or if you're typing backwards, it just. So they're like, oh, here, we got to add a little bit of a timeout. And I'm like, again, some of this stuff, I kind of get the general idea of what they're discussing. I don't get it 100%. So, all right, but I can kind of follow along and do it. I had to pause it in a few instances, Anthony, so I don't know if that's something maybe going forward with some of the other videos to bring up, like if the code can just be in the description or in a comment maybe, that'd be cool. But the resources themselves, like they work out really well, and they're transferable whether you're using Wix Studio, Editor X, or the classic Wix editor. So that's always like very beneficial.
Yeah. Actually, before we close the stream today, Anthony, do you still have that solution up on your screen?
Which one? For the selling items?
From Dustin. What was it called?
Yeah, that
it
was
the sports counter. Do you would it be beneficial, and Dustin, you can let us know in the chat. Do you think it would be beneficial if we can just like copy and paste that in the chat for Dustin, just so he can like
Sure. I'll
take a peek at what's going on there.
And actually, as he's typing, that's the other piece of advice I was going to say. If you are doing this, definitely helps to name your elements, because otherwise then you're going like repeater 1, repeater 2, repeater 5, element like 12, and it's very difficult to keep a track of. So I usually don't tend to do it in my code when I'm making examples, because I don't need like a one-time thing. But yeah, definitely name your elements as you're working with like coding, and even when you're doing the section designs, because it makes it easier just even when you're designing, so you know, okay, this is this section, this is this thing, as opposed to, okay, I have section 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, which one's the about us, which one's the contact, which one's this.
Yes, sir. All right, my friend, Dustin, repeater 234. Awesome, Anthony. Thank you so much, brother.
Yeah, I'm also going to paste a link to some docs because that's the most important part.
Much appreciated. Yeah, guys, see, this wasn't bad. This is just a community conversation. We're helping each other out, and we're just finally recording these things. So after today, guys, you don't have to worry about watching the full 1 hour replay. These will definitely have timestamps by the end of the day, and we are going to be clipping these up hopefully at some point this week or next week. So, Anthony, Robert, any final words to the community before we close out here today?
I'd say just, coding isn't as hard as it looks. It looks very scary, but it's something anybody can do. You just have to, try a lot, and you gotta just push your way through it sometimes. Yeah, we all do. Even your most talented, experienced coder still has to do exactly the same thing. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, listen, Anthony starts his day with some nice Cinnamon Toast Crunch to get at least some of the his first grit of the day. Everybody knows that scrapes the top of your roof or the roof of your mouth. It's his first adversity for the day to get ready to code. I myself like to start with coffee. Robert, how do you start your day to pump yourself up to go through some hard things you're going to go through?
Think about how to get out of bed, I guess.
All right, fighting the covers, guys. Hard things. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Again, the situation for our community in the beginning of each week is Monday. We have Make It Mondays. Tuesday, we are here at Town Hall giving you the new up-to-date features, news, etc. for what's going on with Wix Studio. We'll have guests come to our town halls. And every Wednesday, we're back in our Discord community for our design and chat to have a little bit more intimate hangout sessions and also hand-holding for technical assistance. So thank you, Anthony, so much for giving us an hour of your day. And Robert, thank you so much for putting this together. I really appreciate both of you guys. Other than that,
thank you so much,
I'll see you guys. Yes, thank you very much, my friend. Any upcoming events? If you guys want to know who our next guests are, our next events, what's coming up in our Make It Mondays, join our Discord. Links are down below with all the events coming up. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the Discord. Thank you both, Anthony, Robert. And that's it, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye.